All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the Sustainability Advisory Commission meeting. And we are meeting on Tuesday, November 6th at 7 p.m. Will staff please call the roll?
Stacy Gloss.
Here.
Dustin Allred.
Here.
Claire Johnson.
Here.
Todd Rusk.
Here.
Andrew Stump. Morgan White.
Here.
Tesfaye Wolde Medine.
Here.
Scott Tess.
Here.
Maddie Garbaz.
Here.
So,
Okay, great. We have a quorum this evening. Next item on the agenda would have been approval of the minutes from the previous meeting, but I think they were not included in the packet this past week, so we will review and approve minutes from the October meeting in December. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda this evening? Okay. If there are no members of the public that are here this evening to provide some public input, if anyone shows up, we may go ahead and do public input again in case anybody comes to the meeting and would like to speak. Scott, do you want to give your staff report?
Sure.
Thank you.
Good evening. First, some updates on Climate Action Plan progress. I notified you last month that the city had been contacted by Ameren regarding some energy efficiency incentives. We're still working on evaluating some street lighting opportunities. We have data for all of our street lights in terms of point locations, but the point locations aren't associated with any specific data as to the type of lamp at that location. So that all has to be collected in the raw in order to do any projects.
How do you collect it?
Go physically visit.
Like the public works staff go to visit it?
Correct.
And is this for stuff that would be done by in this calendar year, or is it
Correct.
Just, yeah.
That's, and we're kind of running out of time.
End of the year money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's difficult to mobilize data collection and a project approval in that time frame. So we'll see what we can get done. We may be able to use that information in any event for perhaps like an incremental approach to streetlight retrofits, using the sort of normal Ameren incentives for when you purchase just like the fixture itself, and replace those with staff time instead of a vendor. So we'll see. Recently, staff prepared a new franchise agreement for Ameren's access to operate an electric utility in our right-of-way. Historically, that franchise agreement provided discounted street light service, so just discounted electric supply for street lights. That was their consideration to us for the privilege of using our right-of-way. They're changing that with all their communities, and instead they are providing a cash payment. So we'll go to the full tariff for Ameren street lighting, and instead they'll make us whole and plus a little bit more with annual cash payment. But since we're going to the full tariff for Ameren street lighting, we went ahead and with the help of our municipal electric aggregation consultant or broker, we brokered our electric demand and got a retail electric supply for our street lights. So what's interesting about that is when we had discounted street lighting, we didn't really have an incentive to reduce electric demand because you could just never make the money back. So that's gone. So that's going to be better for us in terms of slowly or speedily replacing our lights with LED.
Scott, did the cash payment equal the discounted amount? Like if you had just switched to paying the full amount to Ameren and then received that cash payment, would your net have been zero?
We're ahead. We're money ahead, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in addition, you were able to drive down the price by working with the aggregation, correct?
Drive down the price as compared to Ameren's full streetlight tariff, yes. Yeah.
What's the duration of it? Is it a 10-year or a 20-year?
Supply agreement, well, I'll just give you both. The franchise is 30-year,
30-year?
and
Okay.
the electric supply agreements are 3-year.
Okay.
What we originally received from the electric supply agreements, and what I'm told is typical, is a stipulation that this vendor calls material change. That is, that we are limited without penalty from adjusting our electric demand more than 10% more or less.
Mm.
So you can't, cut your electric demand in half, energy efficiency, for instance, without a penalty, because they're giving you a certain price based on a certain volume of sales expectations. Because we know we want to do some LED retrofits, our broker was able to get a 30% material change allowance, so that gives us a lot more space, and we shouldn't, bump up into that 30% with any actions we undertake. So that's nice, a nice feature that we got built into that. Moving on to renewables. At the time that I wrote this, and I think still today, Solar Urbana-Champaign had officially closed at 482 kilowatts of capacity signed up. We did 447, I think, last year. I think it's on the page. 447. So I just rounded it. I was looking at the numbers being a little bit different there. So that's great. Every year we wonder, is this going to be the year where we've soaked up all the demand and there's just not a lot of activity and we won't run the program anymore? But we're not there yet. So
Do you know the breakdown between our county and the second county that we added?
Piatt.
Piatt was just this year, right?
Mhm.
This round, so
I did
kind of
not.
curious how much is from that other location.
I did not look, but anecdotally, my recollection is most of the contracts and most of the kilowatts are
Still in
Champaign County. Yeah. So very encouraging, and I'm super pleased, and maybe we will do this again. So another chance if you haven't signed up for a contract yet.
So the community solar signups have opened up. Do we have visibility into that at all? Or any kind of coordination?
Our installer has a community solar project that they're working on, and is sort of a
It's
last
kind of
option.
co-promoting.
Yeah, as a last option if you can't do. So we had cash purchase as usual. We had PPA, which is new, and then we had the community solar as kind of a last option if none of the others worked for you. And they told us the number of signups, but I can't remember. It was pretty high.
But it was
It was
sign up for
encouraging.
if you're interested in possibly.
Correct.
Right.
Right. It's not at the commitment stage right now.
Correct. There's nothing risked. Also, the installer will have to win an incentive in the incentive lottery.
Yeah.
So, best of luck to them. But there will be a lot of solar built next year. Any other questions? Solar UC?
What's it take to do it again? Like, would you have to get a grant, or is there?
No, so MREA had some grant funding the first year. The second year, we developed a model whereby a portion, it's a mixed model. The vendor makes a cash payment to MREA to cover some of the staff costs that they have. And then in addition to that, above some certain number of kilowatts of installed capacity, they get like a $1 per kilowatt, not $1, but some payment per kilowatt of contracted capacity. So all that to say, the installer has some risk up front, and the participants end up paying the MREA cost for the program. very small fee. So it's a sustainable model.
That's great.
Yeah. And then city staff time is just, contributed to it because it's part of our mission. Moving on, we are very close to concluding a lease option for a landfill solar development with SunPower, a big solar installer and manufacturing company. The incentive applications open up for application January 15th. So that's the very latest we could go. But we've already submitted connection agreements the installer has. And the lease option allows us to apply for the incentive, the installer really. And if they win the incentive, then we go ahead and convert the lease option or exercise the lease option and turn it into a lease and build the project. If we don't win an incentive, the lease option is for some number of months, and it'll allow the installer to apply for the next round, probably the next year of incentives. So that's what we're working on, very close to finishing the option.
Can you tell me where the incentive applications are? That's a weird question. I don't mean like I want to see the incentive application that you have put in. I am interested in like what website, what organization, or what entity does somebody
Power
read
Agency.
more information about this? So it's through the Illinois Power Agency.
And you'll find a link there that goes to a separate website for, I think it's called the Adjustable Block Program.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Community solar is under the Adjustable Block
Yep, it's under
Program.
the adjustable block program.
There's an ecosystem to all that, and sometimes I forget what's a satellite to which planet.
Yeah, yeah.
Some public engagement to report. We had what I thought was a really successful Champaign-Urbana Youth Sustainability Summit. Not to my credit at all, I just showed up, other people did the work. We had a couple of dozen young folks show up on a Saturday morning to listen to some of the most highly credentialed climate scientists in the state and in the country. So I'm buoyed by that. And Maddie, do you want to make a few comments about your experience there?
I thought that for the first time it did actually go very well. We learned a few things about if we were to do this again, what we would do instead or differently, but what we would also keep the same. And there were a lot of people in the morning, which was a little surprising for, like, honestly, I didn't think there'd be like 30 people to show up, but it started to kind of decline after lunch. But a lot of people did stay, and the topics were really interesting, and I personally enjoyed it a lot.
Well, that pattern is true for adult conferences
Yeah.
too. If they're not after lunch. Yeah, it's great. Great work. Congratulations to you and Stacy and the other volunteers. Also note, staff attended a National Science Foundation funded meeting. It was putting together, it's kind of a dialogue between academics who are developing some research and a model for getting at sustainability, health, and equity, and sustainability practitioners, and kind of letting them stress test the academics model. So that was a nice opportunity, and there's some, possibility that we would be able to bring some of that work here, but we'll see, pursue that as far as we can. Switching to U-Cycle, Courtney Kwan, Recycling Coordinator, is here. She's going to talk to us a little bit later about some of the agenda items. But we had the countywide electronics recycling event Saturday, October 13th. Another very successful event. 82 tons of electronics collected. There seems to be no let up in the number of TVs that our area can generate. Someday we'll get them all. That day has not come. Since 2010, we've collected 1,300 tons of electronics. So 1,300 tons that we've kept out of the landfill. In 2019, we anticipate doing 2 more electronics recycling events. You may remember that the state used to have funding for household hazardous waste recycling events as well. But that funding is, they did distribute some funding this year, but not to Champaign County. There was a county nearby.
To Danville, Vermilion County had an event, and then over in Decatur in Macon County. So we had some notice that we were in the running, but it didn't end up that way. So we're hoping maybe this spring will be at one of the counties that they select. So, and that's the Illinois EPA, I should say. So.
And Courtney and the other folks that she collaborates with on that will keep applying every single year, and we'll get one sooner or later. Courtney also attended the National Recycling Conference in St. Louis this year. This is Resource Recycling Conference. This is probably the biggest recycling conference in the country.
Yes.
Big deal. And she was awarded a travel scholarship to attend that. So great opportunity. The next SAC meeting will be December 4th at 7 p.m. in council chambers.
Great, thank you very much for that report. Are there any questions about the staff report? I have a question that may be tangentially related, going back to the Ameren contracts. I recently read an article in the News Gazette that I'm interested in delving a little bit deeper into, which suggested that the average utility bill for customers in our area will increase by $4.50 per month. There was another paragraph that said that those costs would be partially offset if customers were with Ameren, and it seemed to suggest that if you were a municipal customer or part of the municipal aggregation program, that you would not see that benefit. I have questions about this new, their new fee structure, and I haven't begun to delve into that, but I'm very curious about hearing from members from the public and also members of the commission, if you have any thoughts or concerns about the new Ameren rates.
I got the Ameren press release forwarded to me from the journalist actually that wrote the article.
Okay.
And it did not have specifics like rates in it. So they did some of the math and said, well, a typical household will do this, which in a certain sense is nice that they're making it simple, except that it doesn't allow someone to say, well, is that true in my case? Mm-hmm. It's possible. It was some of the challenges there that Ameren's electric rates are not flat. They have a different tiered rate when you go above 100 kilowatt hours in a month. There's a different price. So what was their example case? So some of the fees go up, some of the costs go down. I think maybe natural gas rates were coming down, they said. So obviously everybody enjoys that. There's no aggregation for natural gas. Mm-hmm. So every ratepayer will enjoy that. But the declines, any declines in, I think they referenced some declines in the Ameren electric supply tariff. That won't relate to any folks who are on municipal electric aggregation. So
But part of what makes municipal aggregation successful is that we have 90% of households participating in that. So anyway, so it is setting up an interesting competition between Ameren and then municipally aggregated.
That's kind of what
systems.
We want.
Okay.
Competition in the supply market to drive that price down.
Okay.
Although Ameren should be a disinterested party on the supply side.
Yeah.
Because they don't provide any of the supply themselves. Where do
They
how
pass
do they
it
do the
through.
supply then?
They pass
It's not their
through.
money,
They're
it's
the
not theirs.
distribution company. The supply company is somebody else. I mean, that was part of deregulation, is that the generation and the distribution have to be separate business interests. So
The Illinois Power Agency, in my recollection, they buy power and then Ameren and ComEd sell it at cost, just to have a simple supply, for folks who aren't going to get into the competitive, retail market.
So if your supply is from Ameren, it's actually from IPA.
Right. That's my
Yeah,
understanding.
Makes sense.
I share concern in what the result of, say, so the fact can be one thing and the perception can be another thing. And so I guess, if there's enough people that, say, read a story like that in the News Gazette and, skim the first few paragraphs and say, what? Does that, do we see, an increase in opt-outs? So, one thing I wonder is, well, can we, Scott, you're saying, no, you don't think so. I mean, it
But
takes
I
effort.
think it's a legitimate concern. I do think so, because perception is reality,
Also, I mean,
unfortunately.
I had a hard time understanding, and then, it's going to go up over here, it's going to come down over here, and so what is the average? I mean, the bottom line is that are people going to be charged an extra $60 a year for their Ameren service? How does that affect people in our community?
Mhm.
And I'm interested in figuring out more. I don't know if I'm the appropriate person to say right now, like, we need to delve into this as a commission. Is there any interest from any members to look at this issue a little bit more over the next month and to create an agenda item next month for us to understand it a little better, see what's going on and how the rates have changed?
I would like to understand it more just because I'm curious, but I think that I'm not at all surprised that rates are going up with the, FIJA. That's costs that is impacting the market all across. Where's the money coming from for the rec incentives? Some of it is coming from.
It's a separate.
I think they're all tied
a separate
together.
charge than the supply charge.
Yeah, there's an environmental charge. I think that funds FIJA, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which
So
they didn't
that's just
explicitly
it.
say
I think they're
that
all
charge
tied
was changing,
together
but-
because there's the zero emission credits charges,
Mhm.
there's changes in the capacity charges, there's changes in this, that, and the other thing. I don't really know it very well. I think it's worth getting more info, but I don't know. I don't think someone here has that info.
So
know?
I think they apply to the Illinois Commerce Commission for the rate change, so they would have their proposed rates in there. And then at some point, perhaps just when they become effective, they're available as PDFs, each tariff as a PDF. It's a little complicated if you don't deal with that regularly.
And if we went through a presentation here, what would our purpose be?
Oh, yeah, I think one thing could be, so I agree with the complicated thing on the rate structure, if you go through like line by line in your bill, and also like how, there's like local jurisdiction-based fees and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, I don't know, I'm kind of interested to look at it, but I can't say I'm totally confident that I could do an analysis that sorts through all the complexity. But assuming that let's say, could pull through that, I think it would be interesting to say, well, to just like put out some scenarios, like, I'm this kind of a residential customer, and here's kind of like my monthly use profile, maybe a couple of different scenarios. What does it cost under the, the aggregation thing? What does it cost under the Ameren thing? And, if we look at those, well, what's the difference in the monthly or the annual totals? And I mean, that's what I would want to see, how does it, if we run the numbers ourselves, what do we what do we get out of it, and is there a narrative that is counter to what was published in the News Gazette, and is there reason to publish something in counter to it, you know? So, in theory, those are the things that I would be interested in seeing.
Or does Ameren have a spokesperson like the Act on Energy folks that could assist with that or could come and present? I don't think they do.
No way.
They don't. Not that we know of. Okay.
Get asked.
Okay. We'll do a little bit of thinking on this, and yeah, we'll do a little bit of thinking on this. Just to see if there is any information in the collective memory present here. Has anyone ever attended a meeting either by CUB or Ameren on how to read your electric bill or how to understand it? Do those meetings happen? Have they happened? Have they happened recently?
There was a Faith in Place CUB meeting a year or two ago about
I know
the
what
smart
CUB
grid
is.
stuff. Sorry, Citizens Utility Board.
Okay.
That's a nonprofit created by state statute, if I recall correctly, some number of years ago, to be a ratepayer advocate. Yeah, they did a smart grid information meeting, a couple of them maybe, a couple of years ago, when the smart meters were rolling out, or right before that rollout.
Is it possible for the commission or the city to sponsor an event for the public about understanding your utility bill?
Sure.
Okay, we'll think about that.
I know there's several students on campus who might be interested in helping with that. One in particular comes to mind. If we want to pull in a student, but they'd have to have someone who could direct them on what to do. You know, if it was the event or if it was, you know, making an updated presentation or whatever. So you just let me know if you want that and I'll track them down.
Cool, thanks. Okay. Sorry, any other questions from the staff report since I veered off a little there? No. All right. We have Courtney Kwong, is that last name? From the city of Urbana, who is the recycling coordinator, who is here to present on food scrap recycling this evening.
Yes.
And you have your presentation
Oh,
to give us
yeah,
that?
here.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
This is where we get to see all the files that you work on.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. Good evening. Again, my name is Courtney Kwong. I'm the recycling coordinator for the city of Urbana. And I think there was some interest expressed in learning more about food scrap recycling with the committee. And so a couple years ago, I contacted and kind of updated some of this information, not all of it, but I contacted 3 communities in the Midwest to learn more about their food scrap recycling programs. So tonight I'll talk a little bit about those communities and what I learned from them and how that might be beneficial to the city of Urbana. And just as an overview, some of you maybe know this information, some may not, but US EPA puts out a report every couple years. And in 2015, they said 39 million tons of food waste was generated in the US, with only 5% of that diverted or composted in organics recycling programs. Food scrap alone accounts for 22% of discarded municipal waste. So that's almost a quarter of what we throw away is food alone. The U.S. is the largest contributor to food waste worldwide, and between 4 to 10% of food purchased by food service operations in the U.S. is thrown away before even reaching our plate. So if things look damaged or not perfect, some of that material, or food I should say, is thrown away before it can get anywhere. So that's unfortunate. But that's just a little bit of the background of what the state of food scrap is in the U.S. So I talked to 3 communities. One of them was the village of Oak Park in Illinois. That community is probably closest in population and kind of the way closest to what I would consider Urbana to be in terms of our programs in general for recycling and so forth. So I talked with them. I talked to the city of Dubuque, Iowa, and Hennepin County, Minnesota. And although that's a county, they had quite a few communities that were doing food scrap recycling programs. And these are all curbside programs. So these are all programs just like the U-Cycle program where they select a vendor or they have licensed haulers that pick up food at the street curb. So I'm kind of going through each community, kind of summarizing each program. I'll give a little background and talk about the program and the logistics of the program, the acceptable materials or items, costs, and the challenges of each food scrap program. So Village of Oak Park, they have a food scrap recycling program that began in April of 2013. Their program is subscription basis only, so residents have to call into this village rather and subscribe to the program. And it's available to single family through 5-unit households in the village. And so each subscriber is provided a 95-gallon cart to place their food scrap and landscape material. So I should mention that each of these communities allow both food scrap and landscape waste to be placed together in the cart, which makes sense. Otherwise, you don't get too much material per household. They also provide each resident under sink collection buckets and a box of compostable bags, which are called bio bags, and they're a certified compostable bag, specifically certified under operations that are more commercial composting facilities. They're not so much operations like the Landscape Recycling Center here in Urbana, which is a windrow operation. So places, and we'll kind of go into detail, but places like Waste Management have a facility in the Chicagoland area that is a commercial composter. So they can kind of handle these bio bags. So as I mentioned, they can place both, subscribers can place both food scraps and landscape trimmings inside the cart. In the Village of Oak Park, and this is updated information as of a couple months ago, there was about over 1,500 subscribers participating out of 11,500 eligible households. So 13% of eligible households are currently participating. The village collects about 480 tons of organics annually. And of course, Waste Management is their service provider. So they do have that large collection, commercial collection facility where they can take this material. And then food scrap is collected weekly, seasonally, from April through November. And then food scrap and yard trimmings are collected bi-weekly during the months of December through March, during the winter months. And so organics are sent to Waste Management's facility called Willow Ranch that's located in Romeoville, Illinois. I've actually been there myself and it's pretty spectacular to see. It's just a huge facility and they take in all kinds of food scrap and landscape material. And so unfortunately we don't have anything closer to us here in Urbana, but that's actually the closest one and that's located in Will County. So in turn, Waste Management provides the finished compost for their residents to get for free. So folks can go to their facility and get compost for free. And staffing requirements, which Scott and I have looked at in terms of ever having a composting or organics program here. First year in Village of Oak Park, it took about 20 hours per week, of staff time to subscribe people and to do administrative tasks and get things going for that program. And then for the subsequent years, it took about 4 to 6 hours per week. And so just like in Urbana, there's one staff member that kind of works on the recycling programs, and they actually took over the organics programs as well. And so that staff member has a full-time 40-hour week. And they also secured volunteers to do outreach and education. That will be a huge part of these types of programs, to get the word out and explain the process. So in their community, they have some organizations, 7 Generations Ahead, school green teams, and so forth, and they assisted with outreach and education efforts. For acceptable materials in the village, as we would expect for landscape trimmings, leaves, brush, grass, garden vegetation. For food scraps, what kind of made me interested was they actually take meat and bones. I didn't put that in there, but meat and bones in their program. And I think it's only because they have this commercial process that they're able to use. Bread, fruit, and vegetable scraps, dairy, pasta, coffee grounds, things of that nature. And of course, paper products like paper towels, paper plates, paper food packaging, they'll take in their program. And the costs, and these are just costs of what subscribers pay and what the village pays. It's not full cost recovery of the program, but it's just what is kind of the upfront cost. So obviously there's other costs for overhead to get the program started, for carts, for contractual collections, and so forth. So subscribers pay $14.85 per month per household. And that cost is added to their monthly water bill. And then the village pays Waste Management in return approximately $260,000 annually for the program. And basically, I think that comes down to a cost of each subscriber. And they also pay $14.85 to Waste Management as well, the village does. So I think that comes out to $260,000. We also had a grant to purchase under-sink compost pails and compostable bags. Most programs don't necessarily provide those to residents due to the cost, but they had a $11,000 grant. So they were able to provide their residents with these containers. Otherwise, they informed me that you should budget $10 per household to provide compost pails and compostable bags. Some challenges, these are pretty common challenges for food scrap. Subscribers were not using the specified bio bags that met compostable standards. So that was a big challenge. Some people were just using petroleum-based bags from the grocery store or something like that, and that's a big no-no. Also, I found this kind of amusing, but problems with dog refuse placed in carts and maggots in the summer months. So that was the challenges they told me. So that's the first village, and again, that's the one I think is more similar to Urbana. Also, the city of Dubuque, Iowa is similar in terms of population, and I'm going to go through their background and logistics as well here. So their program began a little earlier than the village of Oak Park. It began in 2005. Also subscription basis only, available to single family households and small businesses. So they do allow small businesses in their program. They didn't really define what they meant by small businesses, but I think it was a certain square footage that they considered a small business. And the city of Dubuque is interesting. They actually prescribe or allow subscribers, I should say, are provided 3 options: a 13-gallon, 48-gallon, or 65-gallon organics cart. So they have their option of what size they would like for their home. And they also get the Understand collection bucket and box of compostable bags. And of course, they put both food scraps and landscape trimmings inside the cart as well. Their program's a little smaller than the Village of Oak Park. They have, and this is, I should say, it might be a little bit larger than this figure. This was 2015 data, but they had, at that time, about 267 subscribers participating out of 19,000 eligible households. And they collected around 200 tons of organics, and they just said that was food waste or food scrap only, annually from subscribers. And they have a service provider, a contractor they use called Full Circle Organics, and that's a local facility near Dubuque. And just like Village of Oak Park, they take their food scrap is collected weekly from April through November. But then for food scraps collected between December and March, they actually ask residents to call in for appointments to pick it up, which I found kind of interesting because I'm not really sure how that works in terms of trucks driving all over the place, but that's the way they have it set up. Their staffing requirements, there is not that many households participating, and they said it just took one part-time staff member to implement the program. And similar to Village of Oak Park, they accept landscape trimmings and fruit and vegetable scraps, meat and bones, coffee filters, soiled food paper, cups, paper towels, and so forth. What I found most interesting is the cost is incredibly low, and I couldn't get an answer where they must be paying for it in some other sense. So this isn't a full-off cost of how much this would cost, but the subscribers pay $1 a month for the 13-gallon recycle cart, or organics cart, I'm sorry, $8 a month for a 48-gallon cart, and $11 a month for a 65-gallon cart, which is really affordable. And they pay Full Circle Organics, the city does, $29 per ton and the annual cost is about $5,800 for the 200 tons that they annually collect. And their challenges include odor and vermin during summer months, and then they said once a week collection was not enough during the summer months. And finally, I'll talk about Hennepin County, Minnesota, which is a really, it's over 1 million people in the county. So it's not like us, but they do have a large program area. They have 30 eligible cities right now in Hennepin County. Their organics program began in 2005. A subscription basis only, available to single family through 4-unit households. And in Hennepin County, depending whatever municipalities, and I think there's, they said there's about 30 municipalities that are participating. Subscribers are provided either a 64 or 95-gallon organics cart provided by a private hauler, and there's 10 licensed food scrap haulers in that county, so they have a large amount to pick from. Subscribers, and each community, I should say, might contract with a specific licensed hauler, but there's 10 in total. Subscribers may place both food scraps and landscape material, of course, in those carts. It's estimated about 8 to 10% of county households are participating in the program currently, and they estimate about 15,000 tons of food scrap is diverted annually. So as I mentioned before, there's 10 licensed haulers. Food scrap is collected weekly, year-round in their program. And the bio bags, of course, are required to prevent material from sticking and especially freezing in the winter. So those are a must. Staffing requirements, there is it is a large, for the county, it's one full-time staff member dedicated only to organics recycling. And they said to implement the program, it took about 40 hours per week the first year. 20 to 40 hours per week the second year, and then subsequent years about 10 to 12 hours per week of staff time. Acceptable materials, landscape trimmings, of course, and the usual vegetable, fruit scraps, meat and bones, rice, pasta. And so again, they're using, these licensed haulers are more commercial-based facilities. They're not smaller windrow facilities like our landscape recycling center. So they're able to take things like dairy, meat, things that, cheese and things like that, that are difficult.
Courtney, maybe you have it on another page, but will you be talking about what sort of materials, like, is that list right there something that we could say, oh, these would work and these would not work on the LRC, or do you have that elsewhere?
I think I know, I mean, I know in my head, but I didn't put it on a paper.
Yeah, so if you just go back to that page,
Yes.
I just, I know meat and bones would not be something.
Yeah, it would be pretty, I think it would be pretty minimal. I think fruit and vegetable scraps,
Not
probably
paper products.
I think it would, if it was waxy, I don't think they would take it. It would have to be maybe napkins, maybe some paper products, eggshells, of course, coffee grounds I think would be okay. Yeah.
The thing about the Landscape Recycling Center is it is a high turnover facility. Materials generally don't last more than a season there. So unlike bigger facilities where they have many, many acres and they're really stockpiling and cooking materials for years on end, we're pushing things through very fast. And so the Landscape Recycling Center has tried the bio bags in past years, and it was very, very poor experience. They've received waxed paper cups in the past, very poor experience. So they would not be in the business of taking any of that.
But so food is plant material, obviously, and then rice, pasta, bread, cheese, would those be?
I would say
Maybe, or maybe
no to
those are
cheese,
debatable.
to dairy, I wouldn't think
We'll
so.
see. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know.
And-
Dairy might be a borderline one.
Yeah.
And
See.
eggshells and coffee grounds are kind of dependent on volume, right?
Eggshells and coffee
I
grounds
think
are
those are
pretty easy.
pretty-
That's not a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, the others would have to just depend on what they thought. I think some of them cause more odor, and that would be a concern too. But yeah, I think it would just kind of depend. But those are the main things.
Thanks.
Costs in that program. So this is throughout the communities that participate. The subscribers pay on average about $68 a month. So again, that's pretty affordable through their licensed hauler. And then their tipping fee is about $15 a ton for organics, and that's kind of the average for the county. Of course, their challenge is also nuisance pests. So they said bagging the organics helps reduce pests in their program. And then I just kind of wanted to summarize the 3 communities, and they all had a lot in common, as you saw. They're subscription-based. They're all subscription-based, so people can subscribe into the program. It's not a mandatory program, so they can kind of keep things, communicate better with the subscribers or the residents and so forth. Food, scrap, and landscape trimmings are always commingled in those programs. And of course the tipping fees, and I kind of went over it with the $15 tipping fee and the $29 tipping fee with Dubuque. Tipping fees are significantly less than municipal solid waste landfill tipping fees. So that's a huge incentive to have a program like this, especially in those communities.
Hey, Courtney,
Yes.
I wonder about that point for us here. So like, a residential customer, we're not paying tipping. I mean, we're not directly paying tipping fees. We pay like we have like a monthly contract amount, and it assumes like, well, I got this size can or I got this size can. So I guess I wonder if we think about Urbana, who would actually see that incentive?
Well, so I mean, I think it would come down to the customer. I mean, if the hauler pays less than tipping fee by dumping materials, I would think that the cost would come down for their customers. in my mind. I'm not sure.
Are you thinking on the garbage side? Where's the
Well, yeah, on the garbage side, like if, if people are gonna pay for something like that, they would have to see, well, I don't know, a lot of, except for the people that are just like totally gung-ho, they'd have to see a return on the other side of it, and that might have to be some kind of mediated negotiation with the haulers.
If you think about the highest participation level of these, I think it was 13% was the highest. At that rate, that's probably not enough for a hauler to lower their rates for all of their customers. And I don't think they're going to get into, well, you're giving me less volume, so I'll give you a lower rate because you're doing food scrap. I don't think that's going to happen.
So we're looking at the gung-ho folks that are just willing
You're
to
not
pay
going to
for
lower
it.
garbage costs
No,
because
there's also a lot of households, like single-family homes, still have 2 garbage containers.
Mm.
And they take 2 garbage down, they're paying for 2 garbage containers, right? And you could clearly replace one with organic.
Okay,
So there's some people out there.
okay.
We don't know very many of them, but they're there. So-
yeah, I think
So that's one way.
Yeah.
there's reasons why there's some advantages to doing a voluntary subscription service, but I don't think we're going to lower garbage rates and sort of offset in that sense.
I mean, I can see in the big picture how the incentive comes out, but like if it was something that we wanted to promote and get people to do, I don't know, it's just, the pathway is not so clear as like comparing tonnage tipping fees, unless, we have the 2 canners.
Well, the other thing is, my garbage gets picked up every week because I don't know of an option to pick it up only every other week. But I have the 1 container and I could put all my garbage for 2 weeks in 1 container. I don't know what the rules are. Is there
The ordinance is every week.
Yeah.
every week?
Yeah.
Okay. So
In fact-
maybe smaller.
But they
Can
are-
that change?
There's also the city ordinance also requires some multiple volumes of service offerings from licensed haulers. So yeah, as Todd described, there may be instances, and as you described, there may be instances where someone has a high level of garbage service and can reduce it. But I don't anticipate changing market garbage rates with food scrap collection at the levels that we would anticipate.
And I think some of the haulers do offer different container volume size, so 13 gallon and so forth. So, if you have smaller amounts that can, reduce cost and so forth.
I think some of the commercial folks might see the incentive more directly because they're more directly tied to their tipping fees and the number of pickups they have and the size of their container,
That too, absolutely, I think. So, and then they mentioned bio bags were required in all the communities that I looked over to reduce pests and vermin. Of course, the biggest challenges, and this is always going to be a challenge, is pests, vermin, and odor in these facilities, and for organics. But if it's managed well, this isn't such an issue. But sometimes during the summer months and so forth at the curb, these things become a challenge. And the average household, looking at the 3 communities, the average household cost per month, and this is just the cost for organics recycling, is about $9.50. So fairly affordable, but it just kind of depends on the program. And just some reasons that the food scrap composting could benefit Urbana. Of course, food scrap is diverted from landfills, extending landfills' life. So even though we don't have a landfill in Champaign County, there are surrounding landfills in the state, Vermilion County, and so forth, that would benefit from us, because a lot of the material that we collect can either go to, mostly I think it goes to Danville. Maybe some goes to Pontiac, so that does help with the landfill extending its life. It's also a valuable, beneficial end product as compost. So food scrap does really have, it's very nutrient dense actually, and so it would make a very good compost product if done correctly. So that would be a valuable asset, for example, for the LRC to sell, is the nutrient dense product. Of course, it reduces methane gas emitted at landfills, so it's a greenhouse gas at 21 times as potent as carbon dioxide. And then it saves resources, so a lot of times people don't realize that throwing away food, waste, water, fuel, labor, etc., used to make the food to begin with, or to grow the food. And I think that was the end of my presentation for food scrap. Does anyone have any questions for me?
So this, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, I actually don't understand it. If you have food and you're putting it in a landfill, it's going to very, very slowly decompose, maybe over time, and that's how methane's emitted. So if you put it in a compost in a windrow, how does that reduce the methane? Does that reduce the emissions?
I would think so, but I'm not an expert in that. I think just because of the quicker process, and it's not, the landfill is capped and there's very little oxygen that gets into the landfill, and then versus these compost facilities or a windrow facility where they're constantly churning material, and it's not a anaerobic process. So it's, landfills, the material just sits there forever. It doesn't really actually decompose too much. It's just kind of sits there once it's capped, and yeah, so that just lets the methane.
The having oxygen,
produce.
so it's aerobic, it means that it's not methane that's being emitted. Because
Correct.
they're combining it with something
You're
else.
oxidizing the carbon.
Correct.
I didn't take any classes in that in college.
That's a good question.
Anaerobic versus aerobic is the distinction, where you get methane versus carbon dioxide.
Okay.
Which of these communities had full cost recovery from the program?
I didn't actually, none of them were really showed full cost recovery. I didn't really go into that, but I can if you want additional information. So I didn't go into the overhead, just kind of basically what the subscribers pay,
Yeah.
the communities, and then maybe the tipping fee, and that's about it.
But that doesn't cover the staff time.
No, I didn't include staff costs or necessarily a contractual fee cost. There might be additional costs to that, and cart costs perhaps. Some of it's already included, but some of it isn't. So just materials, and other overhead costs.
Clearly, the $1 a month is not cost recovery.
No.
The $14.85 might be pretty close to full cost recovery.
Yeah.
What do you think could be feasible for Urbana?
Well,
I mean, we've went around this a little bit, and so I just, I'm curious. You've seen some things. I mean, I really like these case studies, and it's nice to see these communities that are comparable in different ways. And so I don't know. What do you see that might make sense here?
well, it kind of depends. One thing is the facility we have, so we're really limited here.
Yeah.
So if we, the Landscape Recycling Center, if they were agreeable to it, would only be able to take a certain amount per IEPA regulation. So they have a permit that takes, I knew the number before, but I don't remember, a certain 10% of food scrap
I see.
for their site. They might be able to extend that with a
Because of the
special.
size or other characteristics of the...
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So that kind of limits us. I mean, we could get, some folks in the program, but since we don't have any large-scale commercial facility around here, it would require transporting that material perhaps a far distance. So, if it were Will County, that's quite a far distance. So that cost would be another cost, fuel cost, and plus it's not very sustainable to be driving this material. I think there might be in the southern part of the state some farmers that were taking compost and things like that, but again, you still have to transport it. So I think the biggest cost, it's hard for me to kind of come up with an amount, because really when I think about it, it really comes down to we need to have a facility that we can bring this material to. Now, if we lived in the northern part of the state, well, I could say it would be similar to Village of Oak Park because they have, Waste Management does a lot of that area, and they'd be able to transport things pretty quickly and easily. But it's hard for me to kind of come up with a cost necessarily because of what we're limited to.
I see.
But I think normally I think it would probably be around $15 a month perhaps, but I'm not really sure. And then also depends on how many people subscribe to the program. So the less people, the more costs for a contractor, for example, to go around and collect materials, and more volume, more affordable costs we would get price to contract out.
Do you think that we should try a pilot at the LRC with just maybe some volunteers who would help, I guess I'm thinking like a mini subscriber pilot. So some people who are willing to invest in it as an investment to the community, can we get 50 people who pay $50 a month or something and try, get into some of the logistics and experience at the LRC so we can actually test it? Or do you think it'd be better to try to get like a single source that would do some of that testing, whether it's something with the U of I or with the hospitals or something, or a restaurant?
I think we've talked about this before, and Scott and I should say, and in my mind, although not true pilot, that we talked about pre-consumer scraps, so stuff from grocery stores, not post-consumer, to start off to see how that went at the LRC in terms of the end product, if they were satisfied with any kind of vermin or odor issues and things like that, and kind of start with the pre-consumer stuff before going into post-consumer. Personally, I would love to see a pilot program. I think they would have, our division, our LRC would have to be on board with us, but I think that would be obviously a good start. I wouldn't just say, hey, let's start it. And I think, a lot of these programs did, and I didn't really mention that, but they all started with pilot programs, and then they went into full programs.
So you're saying more like a single source to be the pilot, be the test, the guinea pig?
I think that's what we kind of discussed in the past, kind of a single source, or kind of a maybe just a few grocery stores, and it's the pre-consumer, like fruit and vegetable scraps from their produce department, for example. So something to test the waters and see how things go and how it works for them based on what the resources they have.
And what's the current discussion with the LRC? Because I've heard it from other sides, but are you guys directly, is this even on your plate, or did you pull it together because we asked for it? Where are you at in that conversation?
We're at the point where we need to get some direction from city leadership. We had turnover in the Public Works Director's office, so Bill Gray retired, long-time Public Works Director. So we need to get some direction from leadership as to whether we have a viable concept that can move forward. Potentially we could have that conversation in this calendar year. We'll see.
Are you and Courtney not working on a proposal with subscribers for a pilot project?
That's what I'm referring to. We need to get some direction from leadership. We'll give them some information about what we think is possible. This is the baseline of what we're discussing. And the LRC being, as Courtney described, the only viable location would be in play in any proposal.
Could the food scrap collection go to the sanitary district and their digester? Is that also something you've gotten into, or have you really only focused on the LRC for now?
Well, I've only looked into the land-based kind of composting facilities, but I haven't looked into that. But I know the U of I.
Yeah, we've been in discussions about that.
You all are going to run that pilot So, they'll take the
I've heard that too.
yeah.
Cannot confirm it.
You're going to run that pilot, and you'll take food scrap to truck it to the wastewater treatment plant, and they will see how that works out for them, and then they can make a determination as to whether they want to take more volume. They can only produce so much gas profitably for themselves at this point. It's just some mechanical limitations.
So I didn't hear your answer, and I don't know if you meant to not answer, but is LRC in the conversation with you?
Sure, we've talked to, several years ago, we talked to some of the staff, and I've also talked to supervisors as well.
So you're interested?
Yeah, we're talking to them.
So one of the things that I think is kind of interesting about the three case studies that you presented are that they're combining yard waste and food waste together. And I think that that's interesting because I think people are already used to doing yard waste. They're used to buying the bags and putting the bags out on the curb, unless you're my household. But that's another story because we collect it in our backyard. But so folks are used to that. So I'm curious about the bio bags, if that's just adding then another sort of bag just into that mix. I realize it's kind of complicated, but it's combining these two things, one of which people already do and think is kind of easy, getting them to pay for it in a different way. I think that pickup is sort of, my understanding is free for the yard waste on the pickup dates.
It's no additional cost. It's paid for by the recycle fee.
So it's paid for through recycle already.
Yeah.
So I think that the public, I don't know, I think that the public acceptance of a program like this isn't necessarily the challenge. And maybe the location and what to do with it. Another thing that I'm just curious about is, and I don't know how to put this out there, but could the city develop a RFQ, to put out an RFQ out to the world to say look, we think we have a program here. Who wants to develop a facility, a private or a nonprofit entity on some land somewhere locally? These programs happen in cities, in concrete buildings. So I don't think that land is really the issue.
The permit is a bigger barrier from Illinois EPA. Yeah, if we were directed by leadership, we probably do. I mean, potentially, depending on the information we need, we may do a request for information from haulers.
Okay. Yeah.
I think we probably, if the LRC is the right facility, we'd focus on that because they already have the permit that can allow food scrap versus trying to work with a property owner that's going to get the permit.
Right, because we don't think it will reach the limit quickly, is what you're saying.
I don't think it'll reach the limit with a subscription type program.
Is LRC at Urbana solely for Urbana, or is it for Urbana and Champaign use? I'm also wondering about the partnership opportunities with the city of Champaign. I mean, we have nearly 50,000 residents. They have 80 or 90,000 residents. Combining the two, we all have the same haulers, I'm assuming, because they're all selling their services.
The LRC was started a long time ago as a partnership between Urbana, Champaign, and the county.
Okay.
The county has exited that partnership. Champaign is still in it. The facility is operated by City of Urbana staff.
And when you were talking about earlier about the bio bags, if we were to use the LRC, for example, we would probably require people to use, even if we gave out carts, actually using those 30-gallon paper lawn and garden bags to contain both the landscape and the organics, since they really can't accommodate the bio bags. And they've tested those back in I think it was the late 90s, early 2000s, and they didn't work out. So that's probably the way we would have to look at it if we were to use LPC.
With any luck, there's a garbage can, a plastic can out there that is, you know, that
Okay.
shape and size, and you can
Yeah,
just
kind of
slide it
in there, sort of. Yeah.
We haven't gone so far as to shop for that yet.
Sorry, thank you so much for this presentation. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
The next one's
Are
Courtney.
you on the next one
Yeah,
too?
I'm on the next.
Okay.
I'm on the docket for the next one.
So the next item on the agenda will be for Courtney to share information with us about the Carryout Bag Fee Act, or Senate Bill 1597. That's in the Illinois Senate, or originating in the Illinois Senate.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So, just to give an update about, and some of you may have heard about this, and you may not have. It's called the Carryout Bag Fee Act, Senate Bill 1597, and you can go to the Illinois General Assembly and type that Senate bill in, and the whole act will come up. But this is a bill sponsored by Senator Terry Link. He's from the Chicagoland area, I think in Lake County area. And it provides that this would be a statewide carryout bag fee, providing that each, which is 5 cents, is imposed on each carryout bag used by customers at retail establishments located in Illinois. So that's 5 cents a bag. And kind of getting down into the specifics, so each retail establishment, they charge customers 5 cents a fee for each bag. They retain 2 cents of each of the fee, and then 2 cents is distributed to either the county or the municipal joint action agency. And then 1 cent goes into the Illinois General Revenue Fund. And I'm just going to talk over, these are not all the provisions, there's a lot of them. So I'm just going to go through a couple of them just to kind of give you an overview. One is that it limits the use of the county or municipal joint action agency portion of the fees received to specified purposes. So you can, they may only require you to have household hazardous waste collections, which in our case would be wonderful with the fees that we retain for the county or municipal joint action agency. And then it does provide that, and there's some counties or municipalities that have discussed this. I know Champaign has, provides that a county or municipality may not ban, place a fee or tax, or regulate in any other manner the use, disposition, content, taxation, or sale of auxiliary containers, and I'll define that as well in a little bit, except for carry-out bags in retail establishments. And it provides that if a government entity or vendor receives any part of the county or municipality's portion of a fee imposed for carry-out bags, and then contracts with the county or municipality to provide a household hazardous waste collection program, it must specify the items the government entity or vendor is required to take back as well. So a lot of language. And then just to kind of give you an idea what an auxiliary container is, or what they define that is, it means a bag, a carry-out bag, a cup, bottle, or other packaging that's designed to be reusable or single-use in matter. So it could be made from paper, plastic, cloth, and they go on cardboard, corrugated material, aluminum, glass, polystyrene, and so forth. That is designed for transporting, containing, or protecting merchandise, food or beverages from a food service or retail establishment. And then they define carry-out bag as a plastic, paper, or compostable bag that is provided by a retail establishment at a cash register, check stand, point of sale, or other point of departure to a customer for the purpose of transporting goods out of a retail establishment. And then, of course, there's exceptions to this bill that they're proposing. So it would exclude bags for bulk items like nuts or produce, bags for greeting cards, bags for containing meat products, to wrap flowers or bakery goods, for prescription drugs, newspaper bags, reusable bags, dry cleaning bags, or bags with a retail price of at least 50 cents each. So I found that kind of interesting as well. So that's just a really very brief overview. Obviously, the entire bill is at illinoisga.gov website. You can search for the bill. They're going to have this bill on the docket and veto session this month, and so we will see what happens at that point. Does anyone have any questions regarding this or how it would affect
Do you know if,
residents?
so if when I get a paper bag, I reuse it. Do you know if it's considered like how do they define reusable bag? Did that get
I think they kind of,
fee exception is,
okay, I think they will
There's not an
accept.
exception
well,
if you happen to reuse it. I mean, it's a single-use thing.
it's considered a single use.
Single use, yeah.
An assumption that it's a single use.
It's assumed in, plastic, paper, even cloth that they consider a single use. And so that's the unfortunate thing. So it would have to be, so any bag, even if you brought back your bag, they wouldn't
It's still taxed.
still be taxed. Yeah.
Has the city taken a position on this bill?
No, we haven't, not yet. No.
Is the city going to take a position?
It's another, just zooming out a little bit and thinking about political action at the state level. It's another item that we need to discuss with our new leadership, and as I mentioned before, transition in leadership, new city administrator, vacancy in the public works director. We haven't had a chance to have a discussion about that, maybe in the next month or so.
Are you concerned that it would, because doesn't this include the restriction on what we might be able to later enact at the city level if they put this forward?
It would mean that it does say that, where were we here? So they do say implicitly that if you may not place a ban on so if the city is interested in placing a ban on plastic bags or paper bags or all single-use bags, you would not be able to. So that's the obviously they put that in the language. So some cities were not happy about that. We haven't. I know Champaign did a study maybe 6 or 7 years ago about plastic bag ban. At this point, we haven't done anything, but that is a conversation that Scott and I might have to have with them.
Like this has, this would basically say you couldn't ban styrofoam take-home containers.
Correct.
Yes, because auxiliary container is defined as any polystyrene or bottle, or I mean they pretty much put everything.
Rules on how to allow it in the future.
Yes.
Well,
here's a little cash for the bags. Now you're done.
Now, it does not ban the General Assembly from, or prohibit the General Assembly from managing these other auxiliary containers in some way in another bill.
Mm-hmm.
It just
Right.
prohibits municipalities from doing so. And no municipality in our area has done so heretofore. So there's no reason to expect them to do it in the next 10 years. So are you giving up much? I'm not sure that you are. But certainly there's a trade-off there.
You talked about any sense of so say 2% or 2 cents to the local government entity. Any sense of, I don't know, what is that cash flow on an annual basis? How many bags are we talking about?
I actually don't have that information. I would have to look.
I did that back in the envelope math based on someone in Illinois, maybe it was City of Chicago, because they have a plastic bag fee, had some information, and I just zoomed that down or scoped that down for Champaign County's population. And I don't remember what the number was, but I remember coming away thinking that's enough to manage household hazardous waste in Champaign County.
So is that what, like tens of thousands or 100,000?
I think it was
or-
more on the 6-digit.
Okay, okay. Interesting. And then there's provisions about how those funds can be used. So there's strings there.
It's
So
not much.
It's not much.
No,
So something loosely related to waste, basically.
Well, it says
or-
you can go to the county to be spent on items in their countywide solid waste management plan.
Mhm.
Well, Courtney and the folks she collaborates with at the county and the other cities write the solid waste plan every how many years?
It's
Every 5 years. So basically, whatever we want it to say is what they write in it.
I see.
So it's not, all it's saying is you have to have a plan, basically.
Mhm.
So in our sense, I mean, the bad is that, you know, it limits us to ban anything. So it limits the community to ban like styrofoam cups or things like that. And then, but in the positive sense, we do get funding for programs that we really need. Since we don't have a landfill in Champaign County, we don't get the tipping fee revenue that some of the counties do. Other communities do that have landfills in their county. So they are able to do programs like household hazardous waste and different programs that, since we don't have that revenue source, we're unable to do. So on the plus side, we're able to get, perhaps get a revenue source so we can actually have some of these programs to benefit our residents.
Mhm.
So.
Do you know current status of the bill right now? I mean, this isn't really a time where they're, pushing legislation through.
Yeah, I think they have, I don't think it's maybe next week, I don't know, Scott, if you have that veto session.
I don't know the calendar for the General Assembly.
But I think they're going to try to, see if they can push it through then. Otherwise, it'll have to wait. But
Website says it's referred to assignments, the bill.
Okay.
Also, veto session is November 13th through 15th, and then again the 27th through the 29th. And I think it's called veto session, so this is interesting that a bill could come up. At least my understanding of veto session based on an email from the environmental IEC, Illinois Environmental Council, was that the purpose of the session is that legislators are voting to override bills that the governor has vetoed, or in some cases consider some new legislation. So I guess under new legislation, this is something that could potentially come up.
I guess so. I know I talked with, his name is Walter Willis. He runs SWALCO, Solid Waste Agency of Lake County.
Okay.
He works with Senator Link, and he was the one that told me that they're going to try to push it through a veto session. So hopefully we'll find out. And I think he mentioned it was next week. I was trying to get the dates in my mind, so probably the 13th or the 15th they're going to try to push that.
Has there been any conversation, maybe you already said it, Scott, between you and leadership on the role that a commission can play in supporting a state legislative action?
So the commission, so certainly members individually can publish a letter to the editor, call their representatives and express whatever opinion they like. The commission, I think it's the general practice of commissions, if they don't have a specific ordinance authority like approving a rezoning or something. If they are an advisory commission, I think it's the practice that they direct their expectations and aspirations to the mayor and city council.
So I think we one time did a resolution or a vote to direct staff to tell council that this is something that we support. So we could move that and vote on it. Would it need to be a resolution, or could it be a providing our information to you? I think the one time I'm remembering it was we just asked you to do it.
We
through
could
a
forward a
vote.
recommendation, right?
I think so.
So this seems like something that could be, like on one hand, it could be tying the hands of the city in a way that it doesn't want. On the other hand, it could be a source of revenue to help the city do some things that it would like to do. So, it would seem like it might be helpful if the city takes a position on it and determines, do we want to advocate for or against? Do we want to learn more about this thing so that we, I don't know, I guess I feel like, maybe the city needs to figure out, well, what do we take a position and what position do we take?
Well, but if they're gonna try to decide in the next 3 weeks, you say it's November 16th or is it December 16th?
November.
Yeah, so, they're gonna, I have an idea. What if we encourage the city to agree on, we want them to, if this gets approved, to use that to support using that revenue for household hazardous waste collection in our county. And we say, this is what we want, and then they have to discuss it, and they,
Question of fact, is household hazardous waste and aspiration already written into our countywide solid waste management plan?
Yes.
So we're already good there.
So,
If we
yeah.
get money,
But-
we can spend it that way.
but the city,
And the funding
we
goes to
would
the
want the city
to
not to
county.
decide, oh, let's spend it on this other thing. I'm
What-
saying we want to
The city
say-
wouldn't get the money.
We don't,
the
no,
county
the
would.
county does. So
But the city can communicate that to the county.
Certainly.
we could communicate our wishes, of course, to the county.
In some ways, nothing, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's just an idea.
In some ways, I just wonder if in this case, if we're able to simply say, as a commission, the commission would like the city, the city council to know that the commission supports or doesn't support the Senate bill about the bag tax. I feel like that's actually all we can really say or do at this point. Scott, do you think that that's
Someone can make a motion to recommend that city council supports anything, supports
So we're advising
this bill, supports using the funds in a certain way, even though it's, supports requesting the county or directing the county to use the funds in a certain way. I think that's all, those are all within the purview of advisory.
So my question is the difference between, we're asking the city to take an action versus we want the city to know that this is something that is currently before state legislation, and that if they decided to take action, the Sustainability Advisory Commission throws their support behind it. It's not us telling them to take an action, but instead saying, like, if you take an action on this, we support you. These are two different things, and both would be okay?
I think
Okay.
But I think if we support it, we should ask them to do something about it.
Okay. Is there a motion on the table? We can debate it later, but is there a motion?
I'm not all that into asking the city to do it.
Thanks, Morgan.
Big city politics aren't really in my habits.
Well, I don't know. I guess I'm still struggling with the pros and cons of the thing. I mean, I don't know what does this mean for revenue for the city. It doesn't go directly to the city, as you said.
It means that there will be funding to implement whatever happens to be in the countywide solid waste management program.
Mhm.
Now, to Morgan's point, lots of things are in there. Maybe the county would be moved to provide commodities recycling for county residents. That's it, probably in the plan. Maybe they would be moved to fund HHW collection. That's in the plan. They're pretty collaborative. I don't think that they're going to just implement something and not talk to their city partners.
But is it part of our climate action plan or city strategic goals to resolve the hazardous waste, household hazardous waste?
I don't remember if we addressed it in the water plan. I don't know if you can think of any other references.
I don't know.
I mean, it's a pretty clear city interest. So, like, Courtney's engaged in HHW collection events in the past. This is not novel territory.
It supports current city staff efforts in
Yes.
support of the community
Yes.
waste reduction
And the county has, I'm part of this as well, but we have a leadership team of people that are interested in household hazardous waste and have, everyone has kind of a background in different things. And so we meet quarterly and we kind of discuss ways to meet our goal of trying to get a household hazardous waste event here or develop a funding source, just because we haven't been able to rely on Illinois EPA for those events. So it's really high at this point. It seems to be pretty high on the county's, at least for the solid waste management part of the county's list, to get things going with household hazardous waste. We've gotten things going now with electronics recycling. That was a big process, and now that's going smoothly. So now our next focus is with the county and the municipalities is household hazardous waste.
Are there other waste priorities that, so I guess just, if we were to recommend household hazardous waste to the detriment of what else, are there other priority, it sounds like you're saying that's the top priority right now.
Based on my conversations, I can't say for sure for the county, but based on my conversation with county staff, that's on the higher list of priorities for the waste management.
Are there other waste priorities that merit?
Not in my list per se. Not so much on my list of things, and I don't think the county is looking. I can't speak for them, but I don't think there's been any recent conversation about expanding, as an example, expanding to all countywide residents for traditional recyclables, for example.
I see.
Things like that.
Or countywide food waste composting or something.
I haven't heard that conversation for food
That'd be a
scrap.
little bit harder sell, I think. Scott's laughing. So what about the hand tying thing of the local governments? Is that a concern? I mean, we haven't done anything, or I don't know.
We haven't done anything. Yeah, we haven't done anything in Urbana per se. I know Champaign had talked about in the past bag bans and stuff like that. We haven't really. We listened to their conversation. I got some information from them. We haven't really gone forward with any of that. But yeah, that is a concern if we decide, or council or staff decide that we should, consider this bag bans or styrofoam, polystyrene cup ban. I know some cities have done that. So take out or carry out styrofoam or polystyrene cups, and they ban that. So they kind of, like I said, there's pros and cons, and I really haven't sat down and really talked to Scott or in detail about all this, and we haven't talked to our leadership in detail about this. So that's something we might need to do.
I guess, you do, you do a lot of work in here, and so I guess I'm curious from you, like, you look at, this list of single-use packaging items, okay, we can't do anything with it. Do you see things on the list where you're like, oh, we really want to be able to do something with, you know what I mean? Are you seeing stuff where it's like, I really wish we're not having our hands tied, or are you kind of feeling like, boy, it'd be nice to...
Yeah, in the past, I think just the money in front of us, that the possibility of having our household hazardous waste is very positive to me personally. I think, you know, at one point I was, you know, and I never really, this is just me talking, I haven't really discussed it. I thought, oh, it'd be nice to have a polystyrene, you know, ban on styrofoam products, but just in my head. But I think now I mean, I don't like the fact that they prohibit you to do, you know, you say, oh, we can't do this, so if we wanted to do something in the future, we can't. But at the same time, if we get this source of funding, we'll be able to do other programs in the community that fall under the solid waste plan for the county. So household hazardous waste, there might be, we've been talking about also paint collection, which latex-based, I should say, is not considered a household hazardous waste. So a lot of communities have paint collections. We've talked about that with the county and the city.
Does that fit in
local
the
city
household
staff.
hazardous waste as well, the paint?
Oil-based does, paint thinners and oil-based paint, but
Okay.
actually, if the Illinois EPA had an event here, they would not take the latex-based paint. So we've discussed, and in fact, I even called some vendors to get some pricing on paint collection, what it would cost for paint collection locally, and they would take the latex-based paint. Or we've talked about swap programs and all these different things, and so that doesn't really fit under the purview of household hazardous waste, but it's another program that kind of relates, and that would be great to do, and it is a costly program.
Mhm.
So that would be another thing to take into consideration.
Okay.
So I think at this point, we're just, the funding is kind of a highlight, just
Yeah.
so that we can start
Okay.
some of these programs.
What's the name of the countywide waste plan that you were talking about? So like there's household hazardous waste is a priority under the county. We have this waste plan.
Yeah,
What's that called again? I'm about to make a motion. I just want to.
well, I just call it the countywide. Scott, do you know the exact title of
I'm
it?
trying to look it up right now.
Champaign County. I don't know if there's an exact title, or it's called the Solid Waste Plan. It's just.
Okay. Okay.
I think you could probably Google it and it'll come up, and I think it's updated. The county
I think it's called
staff.
Solid Waste Management Plan.
Management
We were
plan of
talking about
Champaign
It'd
County.
be nice if it were named Zero Waste instead.
Champaign County Solid Waste Management Plan.
Solid Waste
Okay.
Management Plan. Okay, I just called it
Okay.
Solid Waste Plan, but yeah, Solid Waste Management Plan, and is updated by their county staff every 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess I have a motion, and that is to advise council and mayor to advocate for the passage of Senate Bill 1597, and further that if it passes, that they work with Champaign County to use the funding for priority wastes in the Champaign County Solid Waste Management Plan, such as household hazardous waste and latex paints.
I second that.
Motion and second. Discussion.
I wanted, and I forgot your name, I'm so sorry.
Tamara.
Tamara.
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to see if you would just read back the,
I did not catch the
Okay.
entire thing, but we have 2 recordings of it, so I will have it word for word later. I did get the first part of it, though. Todd made the motion to advise the council and mayor to advocate for the passage of Senate Bill 1597, and if it passes, to
Work with Champaign County to use the funding for priority wastes in the Champaign County Solid Waste Management Plan, such as household hazardous waste and latex paints.
and latex paint. Okay, and that was seconded by Morgan White. Is there any discussion? Any question or debate?
I have
You
a
can say
question.
something, of
I have a
course.
question for
Yeah.
Maddie. So say that it passes and 20 years from now, you know, you're my age, actually you're younger than me. And yeah, and you come up against this restriction in this law. Do you know what you would do?
As in like what would my position?
How you could address, like if you wanted to then ban styrofoam containers in restaurants, do you know how you would do anything if there's a law that says you can't do it?
No.
I just would like to share that you can advocate to change that law. You get
Okay.
a new law,
Okay.
or you make an amendment to
Yes.
this law.
Okay, yes.
You just contact the senators at that time and you explain, you say, I was there, they debated this, and they say, well, we will wait until the right time to address that particular restriction.
Yes.
But you have to,
like
yeah, no, you can.
right now, yeah, it seems like an appropriate bill, and I agree with it right now, but nobody can say the future, and I would agree with that. There are some circumstances in which specific things of the law or bill could be changed.
Thank you. I just wanted to have that conversation.
Okay. Is there any other discussion or debate? Great. Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any abstentions? Any nays? No. Okay, that passes. Thank you. Scott, could you put the agenda back up because my computer died?
Oh, I have a copy of it here too if you
It's
would
an hour and a
like
half
one.
on my battery.
And mine won't turn on without being plugged in.
I think it's on the Internet Explorer.
Not as old as me.
Next tab.
Okay, just to iterate, Courtney, thank you so much for being here tonight and for providing the information that you have about food scrap recycling and the Carryout Bag Fee Act. We really appreciate your perspective and the work that you do in this area. Thank you. For sure. All right, next item on the agenda, and I'm going to try to move through, if possible, the rest of the meeting sort of quickly. It's also really hot in here, so I'm sure that we would all like to get out.
Feel free to open the doors, but I don't know if that'll help.
Okay, thanks. On the agenda is the commission January, our meeting date for January would have been either January 1st or January 2nd.
So simply, we discussed whether we should cancel this meeting last time. It was asked whether there was a vote needed. The answer is no. The chair schedules meetings at her own discretion.
Great. So,
You can tell her what your preference is, but the chair schedules meetings at her discretion.
does anyone have a preference to meet or to hold a January meeting? I will not be holding a January meeting on January 1st.
I prefer to skip January.
Okay. Any other? All right. I see a lot of nods in the room to skip January, so we will be canceling the January Sustainability Advisory Commission meeting. Are there any announcements this evening? Okay. I don't believe we have any old business, and we can now adjourn the meeting. And I can do that. I can adjourn the meeting. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.